Hi Killer Fam! How are you doing today? I hope you all are safe and gorgeous. So, this story revolves around a 16-year-old girl who acted out, due to her depression. People do not always talk about their depression and get help for it, which is really sad, and no one should ever be embarrassed to get help for their mental health. Now, let's just get into this video. Let's get into what Brenda Spencer has going on. So Brenda Spencer was born in 1962, she lived in San Diego or San Carlos, which is like a neighborhood of San Diego. When the story takes place she was 16 years old. So at 16 years old she was 5'2", she had bright red hair, her parents had separated when she was pretty young and she ended up living with her father, and his name was Wallace, and they lived in San Diego still and right across the street from Grover Cleveland Elementary School. They lived in poverty. Brenda would say that they didn't have any furniture in the house, they had one mattress in the home, and that's where they slept. They shared the bed. There was beer cans all throughout the home as well because Wallace was a drinker, and then there wasn't much else in the home. Wallace, the father, wasn't around much because he was an alcoholic. He was verbally abusive, and her mother was just completely disconnected. She wanted nothing to do with Brenda or her ex-husband at all. She remarried and started a new family. So in school Brenda was like the bad girl. She didn't want to be there. She was either ditching or like go out to smoke cigarettes. She would brag about smoking weed or doing drugs, or drinking, and acquaintances said that Brenda expressed hostility towards policemen and had spoken about shooting one, and then talked about doing something big, so she could get on television. So Brenda hated school, but she actually fell in love with photography, and she won a prize in a Humane Society competition. She did really well in it. She got recognized for her photography work in school, and a lot of people would say that she could have done something with that. She attended Patrick Henry High School. One teacher who was interviewed later would say that she was always falling asleep in class, and she was always giving problems. I mean, there was always someone in our classes, like in high school or in middle school, that was always just kind of like the quote-unquote like problem child. Later it was found out when she was in custody, that they did testing on her to see how her brain was working, and they found out that she had damage to her temporal lobe in her brain. She said she fell off of a bicycle when she was like 6 or 7, and hit her head really bad, and when you have damage to your temporal lobe it mainly revolves around hearing and selective hearing, or listening, selective listening. Temporal lobe receives sensory information such as sounds and speech from the ears, and it is also key to being able to comprehend or understand meaningful speech. They think that that was important because maybe that's why she didn't do well in school, but also maybe that's why it led her to do certain things. So Brenda ended up going to a continuation school, and when she was there in 1978, and one of the faculty members at the school would talk to Brenda, and Brenda would express how she was very depressed, and she wants to kill herself. The faculty member had to tell Brenda's father about this, but instead Brenda's father just denied it, that she's not depressed. Brenda's father just kind of ignored it, but this was like a little warning. Brenda would say later on, like all throughout her childhood and her teenage years she was really depressed, and she tried to kill herself on numerous occasions. She would try overdosing on pills or drinking her dad's alcohol that he would just leave around, and it would make her more depressed because whenever she tried to kill herself, she would fail, and it would make her upset because she thought that she wasn't good at anything, that she wasn't even good at killing herself, so it just made her more depressed. Her father was completely absent and had no clue that any of this was going on, because he just wasn't around. She pretty much lived at this house by herself. She had no guidance or anyone to look up to. So Brenda was known to hunt birds in the neighborhood. She was arrested for shooting out the windows of Cleveland Elementary with a BB gun. She said she was trying to hunt these birds, and then she also got arrested for burglary because she broke into someone's house, after which she was on probation. She had to go check in with a probation officer, and in December, she got a psychiatric evaluation. It was arranged by her probation officer, and he recommended that Brenda be admitted to a mental hospital for her depression because she had expressed how depressed she was, but her father had to give permission for her to go and he refused to give her permission. The people around her are seeing the signs that she's not doing well, and they are trying to get her help, but her father is just refusing any kind of help for her. When Christmas 1978 rolls, Brenda just wanted a radio. She tells her father that's what she wants, and then on Christmas Day she gets her gift from her father. He ends up getting her .22 caliber rifle with a telescopic sight and 500 rounds of ammunition instead of a radio. In an interview, later on, they asked, "Brenda, why would your dad get you this?" And she just said, quote, "I asked him for a radio and he bought me a gun. I felt like he wanted me to kill myself." On Monday the 29th of January, 1979, Brenda said she doesn't feel well, so she decides to stay home from school that day. Her father was not at home as always. There was an elementary school across the street from her house. So, she grabs her rifle, she is sitting by the window and she sees all the kids outside, and all these kids would wait outside the gate, and then the principal would come, open up the gate and then all the kids would go into the school. Brenda decided to take her rifle and pointed outside the window, and sadly, she started shooting at the kids and the principal, and anyone she could that were just standing around, and she ended up injuring about 8 students and killing a faculty member that was just trying to protect and help the children. She also killed a custodian that was trying to help the faculty member, and the principal got shot and he ended up passing away. Somebody had called the police, and when he shows up, he was shot in the neck. Brenda ended up firing 30 rounds or over 30 rounds, and after she fired the 30 rounds, she ended up locking herself inside her home for nearly 7 hours. While she was in her home, she had a telephone conversation with a journalist. When Brenda was asked why she did it, she responded, "I don't like Mondays, this livens it up." She later also spoke with police negotiators, telling them those she had shot made easy targets, and that she was going to come out shooting. After being in her home for 7 hours, she eventually came out and she was arrested. Police officers found beer and whiskey bottles all throughout the home when they went inside. But Brenda did not appear to be intoxicated at the time of her arrest. Brenda was tried as an adult, and she pled guilty to 2 counts of murder and assault with a deadly weapon. She was sentenced to prison for 25 years to life, and while in prison, Brenda was diagnosed with epilepsy and she received medication to treat her epilepsy and depression, and she stays at the Institution for Women in Chino, California. In 1993 she was eligible for parole, and this is when Brenda starts to tell more of what happened and why she did it. In the parole hearing, she said that her father had been molesting her all her life. And that's why he never wanted her to go anywhere, and that's why they slept in the same bed, and it was an ongoing thing. She said that on the day of the shooting, she was on a bunch of pills, smoked some weed, and that's what made her do it. Her father didn't.
She was hallucinating after a week of drinking whiskey and taking the powerful drug PCP, a drug she says she bought at school. What does she remember about that morning?
Do you remember the gun?
Mm-hmm. I remember the rifle because I had gotten that a month previous.
As a Christmas present?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was for Christmas.
From your father?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember loading the gun? Do you remember pointing the gun?
Mm-hmm. I remember looking out and seeing like commando types sneaking up on the house and stuff, and I don't remember actually going in and getting the rifle and loading it up, but I remember seeing them and being real scared and terrified. You know, they're coming to get me, and I have to protect myself and stuff. And I know somewhere in there I did go and get the rifle.
So the whole thing to you, 14 years later, is just this drugged out haze. basically.
Yeah, it's really broken up and fragmented. I can't sit there and tell you, well, at this time I did this, and at this time, you know, it's just little bits and pieces that have come back over the years. Like the week prior, that one, I don't really have many memories from that week ahead of the incident. And the week after, I was asleep. I was coming down off the street drugs, and even that week, I don't really have a whole lot of memories of it. It's like I slept a lot and I was going through withdrawals and things.
Brenda Spencer told me what she did that day was not first-degree murder, which takes planning, but the lesser crime of manslaughter.
I don't sit here and plan on how to go out and kill people and stuff like that. That's just not, that's not how I am or who I am. And how it was presented, and it made me look like that.
There were allegations that Brenda Spencer got the rifle, loaded it, planned all of this, and shot those people.
Yeah, and they made it look like, you know, just for the fun of it and stuff, which is totally senseless. There's, every day I live with, you know, the knowledge that I took the lives of 2 men. And that's real difficult.
Right now.
Mitch Duncan, News 8.
You would have.
The parole board chairman said that she had never made these allegations before, that she had never said that she had taken drugs or that her father had sexually molested her. So in 2009, the parole board ruled Brenda would be denied parole, and she would not be considered for the next 10 years, which means that in 10 years she would be eligible for parole again. So Brenda was eligible for parole in year 2019. In 2005, Brenda had later said that she was trying to kill herself, but when she saw police officers outside of the school, she decided that she was going to take the gun and try to shoot at the police officers to get their attention so that the police officers shoot back and kill her, because she wanted to die. The wife of the principal made the videotape expressing that she did not want Brenda to get out, and the videotape also showed that this wife's house was exactly the same as when her husband left that morning. She hasn't touched any of this stuff and everything was exactly the same, and how she's struggling and how Brenda took her husband away from him and ruined her life. Later on, Brenda was diagnosed with schizophrenia and depression. As of September 2020, she remains in prison.